Funeral directors are often the first professionals that somebody consults after losing a loved one due to the carelessness of another. If you have a client that's involved in a wrongful death case and you're a funeral director, there are 5 things that you should definitely keep in mind. First of all, when somebody loses a loved one, as you know, that's a traumatic and painful experience under the best of circumstances. However, when you're dealing with somebody that lost a loved one due to somebody else's carelessness, or maybe due to somebody else's intentional act, that takes the pain and suffering to an entirely new level. And so it's very important, because what I've noticed with my clients a lot of times is if they don't deal with the pain in a healthy way, a lot of times they turn to drugs or alcohol, or they commit acts that they otherwise never would have committed, like suicide, for example. That's obviously the worst case scenario, and it's something that could be avoided if we can get our mutual clients in for counseling with a grief counselor as quickly and early as possible in the process. And so what I've noticed is that my clients, they don't want to go to grief counselors. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to deal with the pain. One of the first things that they do is they try to deny the pain. One of the first steps in the grieving process is denial. But anything we can do to encourage them to seek out counseling and deal with their pain in a healthy way is going to be much better for them. And it's also going to avoid some of the pitfalls that I've noticed my clients fall into in terms of proving their wrongful death case, because if they turn to alcohol and drugs, which a lot of them do, that's really a big negative for their case. The other thing that I would encourage them to do is to seek the counseling of the clergy member if they're religious, if they have whatever religion that they have. Either it's a priest or a rabbi or a pastor or whatever religion they have, because they're often dealing with a crisis of faith because of the premature loss of their loved one. And so they need to be able to deal again with that in a healthy way, to ask the question of, why has this happened to me? Why was my loved one ripped away from me so early and due to no fault of their own or my own? So that's number one. Number two, it's very important to remember that the evidence of your client's damages, the evidence of their loss, of their mental and emotional pain and suffering, begins building as soon as the injury to their loved one happens. As soon as the injury that gives rise to the death of their loved one happens. And so that evidence needs to be preserved in order for me as the wrongful death lawyer to effectively advocate for our mutual client. And so what happens is, I'll give you an example. One of the most powerful pieces of evidence that I've used in wrongful death cases in jury trials is recording and photographing the memorial services. So that can be extremely powerful, because it's a very authentic way of documenting what our mutual client is going through and presenting that to the jury, so that it brings it to life to the jury and also to the insurance company that we're dealing with it, because it brings to life that this is a real, this is real. The pain is real, the suffering is real, and the relationship between the deceased and the survivors is very real. So that's I would highly recommend to the clients that we videotape and record the memorial services. The wrongful death attorney can actually pay for the videotaping and the recording of the memorial services as long as it's used for legal purposes. And that's what I would recommend doing. Okay. Next thing is, if your client was involved in a car crash in Florida, or excuse me, if the deceased was involved in a car crash in Florida, then there is a $5,000 death benefit under their PIP. If they own a car in Florida, they have to have PIP insurance. In every PIP policy, there's a $5,000 death benefit that can go towards funeral expenses. In addition to that, if there is a potential wrongful death case, the wrongful death lawyer can sign a letter of protection that allows you to, as the funeral director, to get paid at the end of the case. And so the letter of protection does not relieve the clients of having to pay for the funeral expenses if the case, if there's no recovery in the case. But if there is a recovery in the case, like there usually is, then the vast majority of wrongful death cases that are represented by an attorney, then the letter of protection just makes sure that you get paid first out of the recovery before any distribution is done to the client. Okay. The next thing to remember, number 4, is the memorabilia that is used in the funeral services is often very good evidence that we use in the case, such as, posters, signs, sign-in books, any sort of memorabilia that is used. Sometimes when people create this memorabilia, it's done very thoughtfully, and it really expresses the depth of emotion, and it expresses elements of the relationship that bring it to life for the insurance company and the jury as we're trying to express and convey the emotion and the damages that our mutual client has suffered. Then the last thing I wanted to mention is that it's incredibly important that your client contact an experienced wrongful death attorney immediately, as quickly as possible after the death. And I do realize that probably the last thing they want to do is deal with an attorney. And they probably also don't want to feel like they just ran to an attorney after the death of their loved one, because they feel there's kind of a weird feeling about that, because they don't want to feel like sue-happy people. But it's incredibly important for an experienced wrongful death attorney to get involved early, so that I or whoever it is can give them guidance as to how to preserve the evidence, what evidence needs to be preserved. They need to go to the counselors. They need to start journaling. There are certain pitfalls that they need to avoid, such as doing a GoFundMe campaign, or is a pitfall to avoid. Posting online. They need the guidance of an experienced attorney, and if they wait too long, then the evidence could have faded and gone away, or they may have created evidence that could be that really be used against them in the ultimate wrongful death case. So those are 5 things that I think are important for funeral directors to know. My name is Jimmy Fasig. I am a wrongful death attorney. If you have any questions about this or need any guidance with clients that are going through wrongful death cases, I'm more than happy to talk. My number is 850-777-7777. Again, I'm Jimmy Fasig, Senior Partner of Fasig Brooks Law Offices, 850-777-7777. Thank you.